Okay, so just checking through your work. To begin with, where you need to label your die cut correctly. So you labeled it Pantone. So the person who's responsible for printing this will think that this is a Pantone color. It needs to be labeled correctly. Okay, so that, although you've made it a spot, and I don't understand why you guys are using Pantone. I asked you not to do that. To create a spot, you don't need to use Pantone. Okay, so this is a, okay, so I'm gonna lock that and unlock your die. So that's your die there, right? So to create a spot, you just create a new color. So say I grab this and I go to my swatches here, I create a new color and I make it a spot. That's it. You don't need to go to a library because it's already got that color. So I'm just going to give it a default color just to show you. Okay, so and get rid of the fill. So for that, you just click on, and you can see it says process there. So I just switch that to spot, and then I change whatever color I want. So something like that, and then call it die cut. So the most important thing is that it must be labeled. It must be labeled. If it's not labeled correctly, then that's wrong. It's not seen as a die cut. It's seen as a color. Please don't use Pantone to do this. Just create a new swatch and switch from process to spot, and then label it any color. It doesn't. I don't care what color you use. Just use any color. I'm going to use in this case the blue. Okay. So that you can see. So now this is a die cut that's been separated and it's been applied to that die cut shape, and I'll be doing the same thing for this one. Okay, so I'm giving it that die cut shape, and take a look. You can see here now that it says die cut, not that Pantone color, and I'm going to throw away that Pantone color so that it doesn't pop up in my artwork. You can see die cut. It must be labeled die cut. You would have had that wrong. Okay, so remember, it's really important, attention to detail. If it's not labeled die cut, then the person who's responsible for printing it doesn't know it's a die cut. They think it's a Pantone color. All right, second of all, you may have missed this when I explained it, but you don't, when you have a die cut like this is good to show a client, okay, where there's white, where the area's been cut out. But when you send this to print, you don't need to do this. So what all you need to do in this case is, I'm going to move this to the side, right? Move this to the side. I'm going to move this one out of the way too. Okay. First thing you need to do in this case to fix this up is you need to make sure that your artboard is the exact size of that die cut. So the artboard must touch that die cut. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in to make sure that it's in between, right in the middle of that die cut. Same thing here. So the die cut should touch the edge of the artboard, basically. Okay, like that. And down the bottom here as well. So we'll get to the color in a minute, but basically that's what you should have artboard wise. Same thing with this. So I'm just using the artboard tool to resize this artboard, and I'm zooming in because I want to be a bit more accurate with this. I want to make sure that it's in the middle of that die cut. So I'm using the smart guides here because it just makes it easy for me to snap to the center. Okay, next step before I fill in this in, right? So, and the other problem that you have here is that you've got this, seems to be, maybe it's just rendering it that way. No, you don't have a border. Good. Okay, I thought you might have a border there. I think it's just rendering it that way for me. Okay, so the other thing we need to do is add a bleed to this. Okay, so we can do this through File and Document Setup, and here you need to make sure you add a 3mm bleed so that you get a bleed going out of the edge of that artwork. Okay, you don't need a bleed here because what I'm about to show you is going to basically knock out anything that you don't. So you don't do this. This is not what you do. What you do is you just create a solid rectangle. Make sure you're on the right layer. That goes from bleed to bleed. From bleed to bleed. So it has to reach the bleed. The die cut will make that shape. You don't have to worry about making that shape. The die cut will cut this bit out. Okay, so just a solid, and the die cut will cut it out. Same thing with this one here. I'm going to just duplicate this, move it across here, just make sure it fits. Yeah, it's about the same size, right? So that's all you need to do. So these go. We don't use these. You don't need to make that shape because the die cut will cut that shape out. Okay, so same thing with this, the die cut will cut that shape out. It looks like this die cut doesn't have the color that I assigned. So I need to make sure that oh no, it is using that color. It just doesn't look like it's rendering it. Okay, so that's correct, and this one's not correct. So you need to make sure that it does not do knockout. So this one, at the moment, if I go to my separations preview, if I hide the die cut, you'll see that there's a white there. And the reason for that is because the die cut has not been set to overprint stroke. And it's too thick. That should be 0.5. I'm not sure if I did something there, but it needs to be 0.5 stroke thickness. Same thing with this one. This one looks like it's set up correctly, 0.5 stroke thickness. So it's just this. So it's under appearance. No, not under appearance. Attributes. Overprint stroke, so that it overprints over the top. So if I hide the die cut, there is no knockout. Okay. No knockout at all. So there you go. So this is what you need to do. You need to make sure that your artboard fits exactly on those die cuts. You need to make sure that you have a 3mm bleed around the edge of that artboard. You do not cut the shape yourself. The die cut will cut it. Okay. So when you had the die cut out, that's good for display to show your client what it'll look like. But on the final print, this is what you should have set up. Okay. Other than that, where you don't have a, what's your finish? You don't have a finish. What? So is it a spot? Is it a? Do you have that in your notes here? No. Yeah. So what? Have you got a varnish? What is it that you're supposed to put in here other than the die cut? Yeah, so that needs to be set up here as a separate color as well. See, you might have to, I might just pause my recording for a minute just so I can take a look at some of your previous notes. All right, so it looks like don't know where you're pointing to spot UV. So you got die cut and you got spot UV here. So matte finish coated. Okay, so that's your paper, and then you've got a spot UV on the, so it just looks to me like you just have a spot UV on the logo, which is fine, but you haven't set that up. So you need to set that up. You said here spot UV varnish. It needs to be set up for the logo. So that's pretty easy done too. That's your logo there. You've got it locked. So let's lock everything else. And that's the logo there. Oh, okay, so you brought it in that way. Okay. That can be a bit of a problem. But then again, maybe not. So what we can do is we need that. It's actually linked as far as I can see. You don't need, with Illustrator, you really shouldn't do that. You should just, it's an Illustrator file. I would just copy paste it. Where is it? Links. There we go. So you've got it linked here. So if I click on edit, it should open it up here, and here it is, right? So this is probably the easiest way rather than starting again with this. You've got the logo in its place, right? So what I would do is copy it, Command or Control C, paste it in front. Actually, yeah, paste it in front. Command or Control F will paste it in front so that I've got a copy of it. Then I'm going to put it into a new layer. And I'll hide the back layer for the moment. Please remember to show that layer again later on. The reason why I'm hiding this layer is I'm going to ungroup it. So Object Ungroup, or I'm just going to Command or Control Shift G a few times. Just so, because sometimes it's grouped multiple times. And I'm going to get rid of the lettering. And there's this, I just know from experience that there's this little black thing here that's kind of hidden. I want to get rid of that. Okay, so, and if I can go to wireframe mode and see it there, Command or Control Y. So I've got nothing there except for that bit. Okay, so now we've got that bit, and we've got in our layer 1, we've got that bit, right? But they need to be one on top of the other. This then needs to be separated as well. So I'm going to close these guys. So this needs to be a separate color. Again, to make a spot color, we don't use Pantone. We make sure that we're selecting the fill. I'll go to my swatches, create a new swatch, make sure that it's set to spot, and then label it. So spot UV varnish. There you go. Right, and again, any color you want except for white and maybe black. So just whatever color you decide. So I can use whatever color I want, as long as it's labeled. That's the important thing, and as long as it's set to spot color. So now this is set to spot color. There's one more step, okay? Because this is over the top, if I don't use attributes, if I don't use the attributes panel, attributes, I hate this, there, attributes. So if I don't use overprint fill, what's going to happen is in my separations, if I hide the spot UV varnish, it's knocked out the ink below. We don't want that. So we need to tick overprint fill so that it doesn't knock out the print below. So now this is going, this solid shape is going to go over the top of that black ink. It's not going to knock it out. Spot UV varnish, it must be labeled. I'm going to save that now. And you will find that that should automatically update here. Yeah, so some files are missing. Would you like to update them now? Yes. Okay, okay. And there you go. So now both of these actually have that applied to them. Both of them have that spot UV varnish applied to them. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're after, but you need to have that spot UV varnish in there. So this is what I'm looking at. So you've got your colors, you've got your die cut, you've got your spot UV varnish. I can hide the spot UV varnish, as you can see, and show it. I can hide the die cut and show it. There is no knockout between all of those. That is what you need to do. So there's still a little bit for you to fix. So it's one of the things that annoys me, and I know that I think some of the slideshows have that. I've got to ask them to remove that from the slideshow. You don't create a spot color by going into your swatch libraries. You just create a new swatch. So just a new swatch, and you switch to spot, and then you label. That's all you need to do, okay? But it must be labeled. If it's not labeled, then the printer doesn't see these as separate objects. It sees them as ink, and it will print them as ink. Okay, all right, hopefully that helps.